President Donald Trump had initially declared a 125% tariff on Chinese imports. However, new information from the White House has confirmed the actual number is even higher, coming in at a staggering 145%, factoring in the previous 20% levy already in place. This overlapping of tariffs has created visible disarray within the administration itself and even sowed confusion among members of Congress, exposing not just internal instability, but also a glaring lack of clarity and coordination in Washington's overall trade strategy. But let's be clear, this 145% figure isn't just a headline. It's a scalpel aimed directly at China's economic lifeline. The greatest blow lands on China's small and mid-sized businesses, which account for an astonishing 60% of the country's total exports and roughly 80% of all private sector employment. According to recent estimates, in just the first quarter of 2025, these exporters have seen orders collapse by 30%, crushed by rising costs and blocked by an enormous tariff wall rising from across the Pacific. And the consequences go far beyond that. Foreign companies that once relied on China's vast industrial machine are now contemplating a full-scale relocation of their operations. This leaves China in a high-risk position, desperately fending off the impact of American tariffs, while also trying to hold on to its global investors before they vanish. When Trump declared, "I will impose global tariffs," the world didn't just listen, it trembled. China erupted, while the US positioned itself as the uncontested commander of this new economic battleground. But the question remains, who will come out on top in this trade war? The European Union, once seen as the most resistant to Trump's economic pressure, unexpectedly shifted course. Initially, Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, called for a united international front to resist the tariff surge. She even went so far as to warn that Trump's strategy could destabilize the global economy. "We're finalizing our first set of countermeasures in response to US steel tariffs," she announced, "and we're ready to prepare further steps to defend our interests if talks fail." But just a few days later, the EU left everyone stunned. Von der Leyen appeared on camera with a completely different message. Europe was now ready to talk. Not only that, they had proposed a mutual elimination of tariffs on industrial goods, pointing to previous trade deals as proof that Europe is always open to a reasonable negotiation. That apparent resistance from the EU quickly faded, turning what once looked like a firm stand into what many saw as a quiet defeat. In Brussels, some officials likely started thinking, why spend another €3 trillion arguing with Trump when we can just end this now? But one thing stayed the same: Trump declared victory, regardless of who came to the table. China, however, wasn't budging. While the EU wavered, China stood its ground and refused to back down. Trump demanded that Beijing remove the 34% retaliatory tariffs it had imposed, but China said no. Instead, it fired back with another 34% tariff, cracked down on exports of rare earth minerals, and rolled out new restrictions on 30 US companies, primarily in the defense sector, adding to dozens already targeted by US tariffs. It became clear, China wasn't backing down. It was preparing for an all-out trade war. Trump, in typical fashion, escalated again. He warned that unless China reversed course, he would add a 50% tariff, or even raise it to 104%. No one could predict what would happen next. The situation spiraled into a global economic boxing match, with both giants throwing blow after blow. The stakes? Nothing less than the future of the global economy. Despite the risk of total collapse, China had no choice, it had to hit back. Meanwhile, Canada may not have made headlines, but they hold a critical card in this global showdown: oil. Prime Minister Danielle Smith made it clear, Canada could easily divert its oil exports to Europe or India if needed, dramatically reshaping the current trade balance. Canada currently supplies the US with nearly 4 million barrels of oil per day, including 700,000 barrels that go directly to the Gulf Coast. That's a number Trump can't afford to ignore. If Canada cuts off that flow, the US faces a crude oil crisis overnight. Could the US simply replace Canada's supply? The answer: not so easily. US refineries would need to undergo major changes to adapt, and the shock to the energy market could be enormous. Fuel analysts are already warning that this disruption could raise gas prices across New England, adding an extra 20 to 40 cents per gallon, maybe more. So now we ask, what happens to American industries as this tariff war intensifies? Are automakers like BMW, Audi, and Mercedes suddenly getting tariff discounts? Far from it. They're being crushed. US factory workers are the ones feeling the full force of these economic punches. American companies now face two choices: shut down or cut production. Either way, the impact hits the workforce first. Even the tech sector isn't safe. Silicon Valley firms are reporting major financial losses as they lose access to the Chinese market. One of their biggest trading partners is vanishing, and Trump is fast becoming the wrecking ball tearing down decades of cooperation. And here comes the difficult question. Does Trump realize that this approach could collapse the entire US economy if it continues unchecked? Reports indicate that 62% of workers in industrial states are already suffering because of the tariffs. And it's not just big business. American farmers are beginning to sound the alarm. I don't know where it ends, one farmer said. I hope it ends soon. I hope we can go back to being good partners with countries around the world, and just sit down and talk. If this continues, it's not just factories. It's the heart of American agriculture that will suffer. And make no mistake, without serious adjustments, the entire US economy could spiral into collapse. So don't change the channel. Because this trade strategy might make Trump look like the winner, but in reality, it could turn the rest of us into the biggest losers. China is no longer lagging behind in the global tech race, it's now rewriting the rules entirely. One of the biggest shocks? China no longer needs access to EUV technology. Those $200 million ASML machines once seen as the crown jewels of chipmaking are now being bypassed. A tech company based in Shenzhen, known as SAR, claims to have created its own lithography process, one capable of producing chips smaller than 7 nanometers. Think back to the Huawei Mate 60 Pro. Its 7 nanometers chip stunned the tech world, and it was built entirely using older DUV technology. No EUV, no ASML. Now, China's SMIC has pushed the frontier even further, entering the testing phase for 5 nanometers chips, and they're not stopping there. Their next goal, 3 nanometers. And how do they plan to get there? By leveraging artificial intelligence for yield optimization and implementing advanced quad patterning techniques. China isn't playing catch-up anymore. It's launching forward. When China stopped sourcing from giants like ASML and TSMC, the fallout was immediate. ASML's revenue dropped by a harsh 27% in Q4 of 2024 alone, a massive hit to Europe's already fragile tech sector. But this battle isn't just about semiconductors anymore. It's become a full-scale economic war. China has started quietly dumping US Treasury bonds and offloading shares in American tech giants like Apple and Nvidia. What was once a chip war is now evolving into a currency war, and the consequences could hit closer to home than you think. If Beijing times a few strategic sell-offs just right, the impact on global markets could be catastrophic. Mortgage rates could skyrocket. Tech stocks could crash. And retirement accounts? They could evaporate in days. Wall Street's next tremor might not come from inside the US, it could start in Beijing. Because this isn't just a power struggle between countries. It's a direct threat to your financial stability, your home, your savings, your future. A new era is rising, one shaped not in Silicon Valley, but in what's now being called Dragon Valley. This is where China is consolidating its influence, its capital, and its chips. SMIC now controls nearly 20% of the global chip market, that's 4 times more than it held just a few years ago. China's not just producing semiconductors. It's redrawing the blueprint of global tech leadership. And whether you're holding a phone, driving a car, or running a business, chances are, the chip powering your tech is already being printed under DUV light in Shenzhen. Meanwhile, Donald Trump dropped another bombshell, a 25% tariff on imported cars, this time, with Japan in the crosshairs. But Japan didn't back down. In fact, Tokyo hit back with fire of its own. Trump argued that the US is bound to protect Japan militarily, yet Japan has no obligation to return the favor. It's a terrible deal, he claimed. We protect them, and they rake in billions from us. But Japan didn't stay silent. The Japanese government issued a clear warning: if the US imposes harm, Japan will retaliate, on every front. This wasn't just about trade anymore. It was a message, a warning about the consequences of undermining one of America's closest allies. Even Japanese media has shifted tone, abandoning the friendly coverage of years past. Now, they're calling for a break from dependency on the United States. Japan has made up its mind. It wants a more independent foreign policy, and it's already reaching out to forge stronger economic alliances with nations like Canada and the European Union. If America doesn't adjust its course, it could face massive fallout. More than 1 million Americans are employed by Japanese companies, most of them in manufacturing hubs across the Midwest. And for 4 consecutive years, Japan has been the top foreign investor in the United States. If those ties are severed, it won't just be job losses, it'll be a blow to strategic trust between the two nations. And that's not all. Japan is also moving aggressively in the defense sector. Tokyo is boosting its military budget and investing heavily in defense technology. This shift could cost major US contractors, companies like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, billions in lost contracts. Worse, Japan may begin realigning its defense partnerships, turning instead to European powers like Germany, France, or Sweden. That would mark a major strategic shift, potentially redirecting defense deals and further eroding US influence in the Indo-Pacific. For the United States, this isn't just about economics. It's about security. Japan has served as America's strongest shield in the region, especially amid growing tensions with China. But if that shield drops, the US could face a full-scale strategic crisis. And if Japan distances itself, who's next? The ripple effects could stretch far beyond Asia, encouraging other allies to rethink their own relationships with Washington. What started as a trade dispute could evolve into a full-scale unraveling of global military alliances. What's unfolding could mark the beginning of a new era, one where countries turn to each other for alliances, security, and economic stability, no longer relying solely on the United States. If this trajectory continues, Washington could face a massive challenge in maintaining its leadership role on the world stage and safeguarding its strategic dominance in key regions. As we've seen in this story, Japan is standing its ground, refusing to be pushed into a corner by Trump's aggressive tariff policies. To understand the current fallout, we need to look back. Trump once declared a sweeping 25% tariff on all vehicles not manufactured in the United States. His message was simple: if it's made in the US, there's no tariff. But that announcement had immediate consequences. Car prices surged. A vehicle once priced at $48,000 could now easily hit $60,000, leaving American consumers stunned. And while regular people are struggling to absorb these soaring costs, workers in the automotive sector are losing their jobs. Meanwhile, China stands by, watching the chaos unfold, and smiling. Even the Ford F-150, often hailed as the quintessential American truck, isn't immune. Although the F-150 is assembled in the US, it contains nearly 30,000 parts sourced from more than 24 countries. Alternators from Mexico, wheels from South Korea, drive shafts from Canada, each of these components now faces Trump's 25% import tariff. That means even America's flagship vehicles are being pulled into this pricing storm. The result? Massive and unexpected cost increases for US car manufacturers. The tariffs on Canadian and Mexican parts alone could add $3,000 to the production cost of a single vehicle. Add another $3,000 to $6,000 for imported wheels and other components. Then factor in tariffs on steel and aluminum, core materials in car manufacturing, and you're looking at an additional $400 to $600 in costs. All combined, a $48,000 vehicle could balloon to $60,000, putting enormous pressure on American families. Trump argues this will bring business back to U.S. soil, but will it? His vision is to force automakers to return manufacturing to the U.S., creating American jobs in the process. But the reality looks quite different. Rather than hiring more workers, many companies are looking at automation to reduce costs. Moving entire supply chains back to America isn't just expensive, it's a logistical nightmare that could take years and cost billions. And even if it were possible, experts warn of potential quality issues and production delays. The U.S. auto industry is now in disarray. For decades, it thrived on a tightly integrated system of cross-border cooperation with Mexico and Canada. Trump's tariffs are fracturing that system, throwing production schedules and logistics into chaos. Instead of focusing on innovation and next-gen vehicles, automakers are now caught in a debate over where to find their parts, and whether importing is even an option anymore. This internal struggle is killing progress, threatening the industry's global competitiveness. And while America stalls, China races ahead. In record time, it has become the world's largest vehicle exporter. Industry experts are now questioning whether the U.S. strategy is sustainable. One analyst put it bluntly, "It's not about the strong crushing the weak, it's about the fast beating the slow." And right now, America is moving too slow. As the U.S. continues to argue over tariffs and supply chain headaches, China is seizing the global car market. The question now is whether the U.S. can maintain its leadership, or whether it's already being overtaken. While political drama plays out on the world stage, satire isn't far behind. Actor Jamie Foxx recently caused a digital earthquake with his eerie impersonation of Donald Trump. The voice, the expressions, the signature frown, it was all so accurate it was unsettling. The crowd couldn't stop laughing, and the clip exploded online. Within hours, Twitter went wild. TikTok trended. Facebook was flooded. Comparison videos of Fox's Trump versus the real Trump started circulating like wildfire. And memes? Endless. From Fox riding down golden escalators to play-by-play commentary with fast food references, it was internet gold. Some even joked that Fox should stand in for Trump at campaign rallies. The buzz was unstoppable. And Trump? Unsurprisingly, he didn't take it well. He tried to dismiss the whole thing, claiming the impression was terrible, but even his loyalists knew better. In the end, Jamie Foxx had done something few could. He imitated Trump so well, it blurred the line between comedy and reality. While Trump fumbled for a response, the internet declared its winner, and it wasn't the real Donald. Even Stevie Wonder weighed in, saying Fox's impersonation was amazing. So who do you trust? Someone who's blind, or someone who's blinded by ego? Trump, once again, couldn't resist. In classic fashion, he jumped on social media, furiously firing off tweets to defend himself. First, he mocked Jamie Foxx, calling him a low-energy actor, a strange jab from a man who refers to golf as a sport. Then he dismissed the whole thing as fake news, because clearly, a performance that accurate had to be part of some grand media conspiracy against him. But here's the kicker, he couldn't even spell Jamie Foxx's name correctly. That single misspelling ignited a digital wildfire. People online were already laughing, but now they were howling. Trump had unintentionally made the impression go even more viral. The internet was eating it up, and Trump had only himself to blame. Now the big question everyone started asking was, has Trump actually seen the video? And if so, how unhinged did he get? Trump has never been able to resist negative attention, and this time was no different. One tweet led to another, each more outraged than the last. And with every furious post, Jamie Foxx's impersonation gained even more power. The more Trump lashed out, the more people celebrated. The internet crowned its champion, and it wasn't the guy in the White House. Fox nailed Trump's tone, his odd phrases, his obsessive name-dropping. While Fox soared with viral fame, Trump fumbled through a rant about great people and Snoop Dogg. It was like Trump couldn't stop himself from turning every roast into a weird, self-serving monologue. But this time, the spotlight was no longer his. Jamie Foxx had taken the stage, and the crowd was loving every second of it. Fox didn't just mimic Trump, he turned him into a caricature so precise it made the real thing look like the parody. And while Fox drew laughs and applause, Trump clung to Twitter, his digital battleground, trying, and failing, to reclaim the narrative. In the end, Trump couldn't rise to the moment. He tweeted. The internet roared. And once again, it won. But the laughter quickly gave way to something darker. A recent White House press conference left the public rattled and asking, what exactly is going on behind closed doors? One of the administration's spokespersons, Caroline Leavitt, made headlines with an outrageous claim that President Biden's recent pardons might be invalid because they were signed using an auto pen. It was a bold accusation, but did it hold any legal weight? The truth, the use of an auto pen has been a standard practice among U.S. presidents for years. There's no law stating it invalidates legal documents. If Leavitt's argument were true, that would also nullify countless executive orders signed in the same way. So why bring it up now? The real goal seems clear: to stir controversy, sow confusion, and distract from more urgent matters. Meanwhile, another controversy was unfolding: mass deportations of Venezuelans, allegedly linked to gangs. But here's the problem: those being deported weren't being shown clear evidence of any crimes. When pressed on how authorities determine gang affiliation, Leavitt simply responded, "We trust law enforcement and intelligence. No trial. No hard proof. Just suspicion." If that's enough to expel someone today, who's next tomorrow? Even more troubling, the administration began releasing videos of these deportations, calling them fun videos. They looked more like propaganda than justice. And then came another blow, when a French politician questioned whether the US still embodied the values of the Statue of Liberty. Instead of answering the concern directly, Leavitt snapped back with, "If it weren't for America, the French would be speaking German." Was this a defense of liberty, or just a deflection from growing global criticism? Then came the most revealing moment of all, a Freudian slip. Leavitt stated, "We want to restore the Department of Justice to fight against law and order." It may have been a mistake, but some believe it was a chilling glimpse into the administration's true mindset. What happens if the DOJ stops being independent? Could it become a political weapon instead of a guardian of justice? And the controversies didn't stop there. In a move that stunned the arts community, Trump appointed himself chairman of the Kennedy Center, then replaced the entire board with political loyalists. Donors pulled their support. Staff resigned en masse. Cultural programs were canceled. Was this really about restoring American culture? Or was it an attempt to turn the arts into another political battlefield? And then there's Alina Habba. She claims to be leading the fight against human trafficking. But months earlier, she was seen praising Andrew Tate, a man accused of trafficking and abuse. Can she be trusted? Can an administration that embraces figures like Tate truly claim to fight exploitation? Are these just isolated incidents, or do they point to something deeper, something more dangerous? Now, the nation stands on edge. This Saturday, more than 1,300 protests are expected to erupt across all 50 states. What could trigger such a coordinated wave of action? It's not just policy. It's pain. Real economic pain. The protests aren't being led by political parties or corporate campaigns. They're rising from the ground up, by ordinary Americans. From teachers to truckers, mothers to machinists, they're standing up, because they feel they have no choice. At the core of this movement is Trump's global tariff policy. Framed as a way to protect American industries, it's now wrecking American livelihoods. Prices are spiking. Businesses are collapsing. Jobs are disappearing. A dozen eggs now costs twice as much. Entire sectors, construction, food, tech, are buckling under the pressure of rising costs. And wages? They've barely moved. The slogan, "America First," is starting to feel like a cruel joke. What's remarkable is where the protests are happening. This isn't just coastal cities. It's Montana, Alaska. Even deep red counties are rising up. Because this isn't about party lines anymore, it's about survival. Americans are realizing that while politicians posture and argue, they're the ones footing the bill. The chant ringing through the streets? Hands off. Hands off our schools. Hands off our healthcare. Hands off our wages. Hands off our democracy. No one told them to rise up. The moment demanded it. And while unrest spreads at home, pressure is building abroad. The European Union has warned that these unilateral tariffs could wreck global supply chains. Canada has denounced the US for failing to cooperate. Mexico has promised retaliation if Washington refuses to back down. These aren't empty threats. They're the seeds of global disruption. If the US stays on this course, it could face capital flight, logistical breakdowns, and deep economic stagnation. Americans are already stretched to the limit, and now the world is pushing back. Will these protests change everything overnight? Probably not. But one thing is certain, the American people aren't waiting for permission to speak up. They've stopped trusting slogans. They want results. And they won't be ignored much longer.